I went to reform school when I was 13 years old. I learned how to take the antenna off of a car, make a 22 long, bullet long zip gun. I learned how to steal a car. I learned how to put the silver paper in. I learned all the shifts. When I got in the street, I destroyed a lot of cars trying to do this stuff. When I got to the state prison, I learned how to pick locks. I learned how to crack safes. I learned how to circumvent burglar alarms. I learned criminal skills. This was my repertoire of survival. Mm-hmm. When I hit the streets in November, that's all I knew. Mm-hmm. And that's the direction I would have been forced to go in. And what saved me is my brother and sister-in-law. But there's a lot of guys that, like yourself, mm-hmm. I mean, you just got dropped into the street after coming out of a torture chamber like DDU.
Not even so much as a bus pass.
Yeah, you know, and here you are.
You know.
You don't get your money, and like, people just don't understand. Listen, this guy's coming back to your community. It's the same scenario as we often hear of taking a dog in a cage, beating him with a stick, bringing him into the community, opening the cage door, and running away. This is what's happening. We're taking human beings, and we are shaking them up, screwing them up mentally, and then throwing them back into our community. This is a public safety issue, people. Rehabilitation, we know how to rehabilitate people. This is what the rub is. We know how to rehabilitate people. The problem is, and I use this a lot of times, is if there was a magic button that if you pressed it, you would instantly rehabilitate all prisoners, reduce recidivism to 0. Would the Department of Corrections press that button? No, they wouldn't. They do not have a vested interest in putting themselves out of work. And the shame is in like Massachusetts, right? I don't know if I have that piece here somewhere, but by law in Massachusetts, no, they are mandated by statute. Here it is here. And what's interesting is up here the word shall. Shall is what's called mandatory language. There is no discretion involved. You shall do this, right? And these are the powers and duties of the Commissioner of Corrections. So we say, shall establish, maintain, and administrate programs of rehabilitation, including but not limited to education, training, and employment. That's mandatory. This is what DOC is supposed to be doing. This is what they're supposed to have done for you to get you out into the street. And it says that employment of persons committed to the custody department designed as far as practical to prepare and assist each such person. Doesn't matter if you're in DDU or if you're in population. Each such person. There's no discrimination. To assume the responsibilities and exercise the rights of a citizen of the Commonwealth. Did you get that?
Got none of that.
Neither have I, and I have never seen it in the prison system.
I walked out with the pillowcase full of legal work and no one to pick me up. And it took me multiple phone calls to even get someone to come get me. And from there, I had to do what I had to do. And
absolutely.
As a result, I was back in prison. And in the same situation, when I was leaving prison, I was in the hole again after multiple months, 6, 10 months, something like that. After an altercation that couldn't be avoided in prison with, probably 30 on 30 guys in the federal prison system, actually Raybrook, FCI Raybrook.
Well, let me keep you with Massachusetts for a minute, right? Because classification, right? In Massachusetts, what classification, what the Department of Correction does with classification is, it uses a carrot and stick. Okay, we're in Walpole Prison, maximum security. I have 3 escapes on me. I can't go to medium or lower level institutions. I'm told in Walpole, if I want to participate in a program, I have to transfer to a medium or a minimum. All right, and that's the carrot and stick. All right, it's a catch-22. I can't possibly make it.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm going to read to you what the statute is. All right, shall F, establish a system of classification of persons committed to the custody of the department, you ready for this? for the purpose of developing a rehabilitation program for each such person. Did you get that?
I've got nothing, none of that. I mean, it's laughable to even hear it.
Well, you gotta laugh, because
you know,
it is so absurd. This is the law. You put me and you in jail for violating the law. This is the law. Shouldn't the Commissioner of Correction go to jail for not obeying it?
In my opinion.
And this is public safety. Because if you were doing this, people would be going out to the street and be in law-abiding prisons. In Norfolk Prison, they had, BU paid for it, the state didn't pay for it. They had a master's degree program. For 3 years, they had a 0 recidivism rate.
That's all gone now, no more.
Yeah, but why? Because
There's the recidivism rate, and it dropped.
it was reducing the recidivism rate.
Yep.
And this is the thing, prisons are not about corrections, they're about job security. And that has to be changed. We have people in prison that don't belong there. And the thing is this, is you know, and I've explained this to people before, and they just shudder. We have a lot of lifers and long-termers in Massachusetts. If we take the lifers and long-termers, and it's not going to happen with all of them, some are not capable of doing it, but you get them master's degrees in education. You get them certified as master electricians, master plumbers, master masons, master carpenters. And then you have them train and teach other prisoners. These other prisoners can now go out to the street as professionals in trades, good jobs that they could make money with. And in the prison, what you use these guys for is to run the maintenance of the prison. Instead of paying exuberant sums of money to these incompetent clown maintenance people,
Took the words out of my mouth.
you could have the prison, and you pay the prisoner minimum wage. And what
Less than
happens?
minimum wage today.
Because if he's getting paid minimum wage, you can tax him, he can pay for his confinement, and he can go to the street with money in his pocket. We can rehabilitate people. What's the problem? Is because once people start rehabilitating, we get rid of prisons through attrition. As people are not coming back and the recidivism rate is going down, then you need less and less prisons. You need less and less guards. And Jesus, look at all the money you're saving. In Massachusetts, we spend more money in corrections than we do on higher education. That's a formula for social disaster.
The correctional officers are just aware of this as we are.
Oh, absolutely.
Every time I walked into a detention center, the same exact sergeant asked me, "Have you procreated? Did you reproduce?" And because he wants to know,
I got a job.
I have job security. Did you reproduce? No, I didn't. All right, make sure you keep my job security together. Go ahead and go.
Well, here's the thing. Education works as a rehabilitative tool.
Well, there's
You're a
none of it.
classic example. What did you do to educate yourself?
I taught myself 2 different languages. I taught myself Spanish, taught myself Italian. I educated myself on business, none of which was offered by the prison because it took away all college correspondence programs. Everything I did was self-educated, and then on the street, I paid for my own education for CompTIA, A+, Network Plus certification.
Don't go too fast. Slow down so they understand what you're doing.
I went on the street. What I did is I paid for myself painstakingly to learn CompTIA, A+.
And what is that?
Network
What is
Plus
Comp?
certification. What it is, it's IT basically. I could set up something from a metropolitan area network all the way down to a small office. I could take apart a computer, rebuild it. But, I have management skills. I've worked numerous different jobs. It's just a matter of not being able to obtain employment with the type of record I have. On the internet, you type my name on any search engine. There I am, very first 3 pages. And the things I was found not guilty of, but that makes no difference. I mean, no one's willing to hire me. Look at the unemployment
So you have
rate.
all these skills that can't get employment.
Yeah, look, there's so many people who have the same exact skills as me, who are qualified, who's trilingual like me, who have all the same things, but they don't have a criminal record. So what would make you lean towards hiring me over someone who doesn't have a criminal record? And I don't blame people. I'd like to, but at the same time, I can understand where they're coming. This is their company. They have a vested interest in it. But people need to change their opinions, change their views on the rehabilitative service. That when they say, "I'm not going to give you a job," They're saying, I have no faith in the correctional system that it actually did what it's supposed to do, correct you. And it didn't. That's what they're telling us when they deny us employment. So here I am to this day right now, and still searching for, better employment. I mean, I had a job. I was making a very fair salary, and as soon as they found out about my, my past, they made it abundantly clear that I was no longer welcome there. And I'm working off the end of the unemployment now. And
How long have you been on the street now?
I just finished off 3 years of federal probation. So I've effectively proven that I can rehabilitate myself, I can make it on the street, and I don't need somebody looking over my shoulder or to be incarcerated to make sure that I don't hurt somebody or do something horrible. I'm totally capable of doing that myself. And no thanks to the prison, because I came out with more problems than I went in with. I'm capable of worse things.
You mean the Department of Correction didn't provide you with rehabilitation?
No, absolutely not. There's no rehabilitation is non-existent. Neither is good time. I mean, the only thing they're interested in is enhancement. Say you wanted to get rehabilitation, say you were in a gang, okay? They want you to sign a piece of paper acknowledging the fact that you were in a gang. You sign that piece of paper acknowledging that you're in a gang. Say you get incarcerated for something in the future. That's a 10-year enhancement right there.
Well, I'm glad you opened that subject up.
Just to get rehabilitation, yeah.
Yeah. The National Institution of Corrections puts out big money. It's a federal agency that's under the Bureau of Prisons, which is under the Department of Justice. And unfortunately, they don't chase the money. California has gangs. They have the Crips, they have the Bloods, they have the Chicanos, they have the Mexican Mafia, and an array of white supremacist groups. They have serious gang problems in the prison. Massachusetts doesn't. And what they ended up doing was the federal government put the money out, NIC put the money out, Department of Corrections grabs the money, and they take 4 cell blocks in the maximum section of the prison, which is 180 cells, and they created gang blocks. And guards became experts in reading tattoos as gang symbols, and what they were doing, right, is any Spanish guy that came into the prison, right, was accused of being a Latin king or la family, right? Yeah, and we're told that you're a gang member. No. Well, if you're not a gang member, then sign this renunciation, or you're going in the gang block. They're signing these things. You can't renounce something you're not. As soon as they signed that, they admitted to being a gang member.
They get put in FBI file.
And they got put in the gang blocks because they turn around and say, well, you were talking to Bobby DeLallo in the yacht. He's a gang member, so you're still a gang member. You're going in the gang block. Bobby DeLallo didn't go to the gang block. Now, what ended up happening was 95% of the individuals in the gang block were Spanish. Guess who wasn't in the gang block? The Mafia wasn't in there. Whitey Bulger's gang people weren't in there. The mobsters from East Boston weren't in there. Why? Because if you mess with their people, they'll blow your brains out. These were kids that had no... And the disaster that occurred is when they created the gang blocks, guess what? Mickey Flipperhead here becomes the gang leader of the block.
And there's no good time.
They created gangs that didn't exist inside the prison. A judge, Judge King, this guy was an ultra-conservative, right? This guy went through the roof. When he said 95%. The Spanish population in the state was like 3.5%. And you got 95% of these people in there. And when they looked at stuff, guy said, I'm not a gang. They told me to sign this, so I go to the gang block. Guy can't read English. He doesn't know what he's signing. He doesn't realize that he's being set up.
I was put on the gang blocks just simply because of the town I lived in, because I was from Lawrence. And that just because it's a well-known gang community.
Absolutely.
I'm Italian. I'm not Puerto Rican or any other nationality that would accept me as a gang member. Still, due to the fact I'm from a community
They needed some more white guys in
they
there.
needed somebody else in there. And the fact of the matter is they denied us all our good time, and when a judge granted it to us because we were unable to earn good time, you know, they still denied it to us. They would not give us the good time. They eliminated good time completely to avoid giving us good time that was owed to many men who spent years in the gang block.
Okay, what they did is another scam. Walpole Prison was being used as a punitive institution. If you took a GED course in Walpole, you was entitled to 2.5 days good time. Any other institution that you took a GED program, you got 2.5 days good time, but not in Walpole. They are so consistently violating the law, and this is the biggest problem that people can't comprehend on the street. Folks, we're talking public safety here. These people are mandated by law to rehabilitate people. Rehabilitation works. It's a doable thing. They don't have a vested interest in doing it. And they're taking individuals, making them worse than they came in, and they're putting them back in your community.
And they know they can't get caught. Because to get somebody, like say what happened over in Nashua Street or something like that, when they brought an FBI agent in to show that they were putting men inside bags and dropping them downstairs, locking the top of the bags. You remember the bag, I'm sure you're familiar with it. The chair, etc., gassing them, then putting the thing over their head, the helmet and whatnot. And they could get FBI agents in there who looked like regular convicts. You can't get those people into DDU to show what's going on because they're known who's coming to DDU. You go to DDU for a reason, a supposed reason that's known by the institution, by the Epstein or perimeter security, or for whatever the reason may be if you're going to the gang block. And mind you, the gang block, we haven't said, is locked down 23 hours a day in 5-man sectors. So you get out 1 hour a day, 5 men at a time. I mean, that alone right there, if that's not segregation, I don't know what is. I mean, and you're given a sentence in there, even in the DSU blocks, when they shut down the gang blocks, that still stayed the same. Nothing changed. It was still all the same.
Just play the same game.
Yeah, it was still all the same gang members. All they did was just move them around to different blocks. And when they did so, all it did was create a bunch of chaos in the institution to prove their point that it needed to be
reclassified them.
Yeah.
And what was the law that said the purpose for classification was for the purpose of developing a rehabilitation program? You reclassify a guy and put him in DSU, the segregation unit.
And then once you're in DSU, that's a downward spiral right there because the next ticket you get is going to have a big red stamp on it that says DDU. And you're guaranteed to go down there because they don't care at that point right there. Once you have a target painted on you, you are going to end up in DDU. And once you're there, the damage is irrevocable.
Let me clarify something for the audience. The inner perimeter security, they call them IPS. These were like the super guards. They wore black uniforms and whatnot, right? They were supposed to be the arbitrator between prisoners and inmates and the guards and the inmates, and keep things a level playing field. That isn't what they end up doing. What ends up happening is if Mike wants to go from the maximum section of Walpole Prison to the minimum section, which is still the maximum section, the difference is down the max end doesn't have a window, the cell down the minimum end has a window, but you're still in the maximum security institution. Michael could go up to the IP and say, how come I can't go down to the minimum section? They would tell him, no, you can go down there, Michael.
You've got to tell somebody
What
first.
what can you do for us?
Yep.
And this is what it is they are cultivating informants, all right? And once Michael becomes an informant, not
Never would
saying
happen.
that,
Yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying. Where you're going
they
with
will
it.
now pass him to law enforcement on the street. And here's what happens, and we have a good case of it in Massachusetts. An individual named Sinelli, Dominic Sinelli, shot a cop in Massachusetts, and all kinds of hell broke out. They got rid of the parole boards, and all kinds of crazy stuff went off. But you know what slipped under the cracks? The reason Sinelli got a parole. Sinelli got a parole because he was a stool pigeon, and they were rewarding him with a parole. That is not the reason to put a person on the street. If an individual in the prison system cannot develop the community within the prison with fellow prisoners, he can't do it in your community.
This is the shooting at Coles in Wakefield you're speaking of,
Right.
right? Yeah.
And now the brother's nail, who's another stool pigeon, but I don't think he's going to get the same right. And we had another thing with the caucus with the Willie Horton. This guy got a furlough. Why did he get the furlough? Because he was an informant. And this is what's wrong with corrections. You're rewarding people for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, look at the rat.
I mean, you know, there's a difference between if I was threatening your life, or I was going to rape you, have sex with you, right? Putting you in the position to where you had to either rat or suffer serious consequences, right? I don't have a problem with that. The individual that wants to put gold stars on his forehead, get an extra candy bar at the end of the week, I have a problem with that individual. Because that you can't develop community with an individual like that. All right? And you can't develop community on the street with an individual like that. That kind of process has got to be stopped. I mean, there are situations where you need informants. You know, someone's going to shoot their way out of the prison, people are going to get killed or shot and whatnot. Okay, you know, you can understand someone ratting that out, saving a life. All right? But just so that somebody can get... In Massachusetts, the book, When the Prisoners Ran Walpole, in the book, when you read it, something is said in the book, and DOC has never challenged this, all right? I was the president of the Prisoners Union. Somebody stole the medication. The corridor was full of prisoners, right? I went down the hospital, and I didn't know it at the time. Walpole had a 580-man population. The medics we had at that time were kids that came from Vietnam. These kids were good. I mean, they saved, guys got stabbed in the heart. 3 guys, and they saved their lives. Wrapped the towel around them, took the belt, pinned it down, and saved lives. I mean, these kids were good. You trusted them. When I went in there, I said, what the hell's going on? They said, you know, like, the pills were in a brown bag, kept in this glass cabinet. Only 3 people know, the 2 medics and an inmate. I called the inmate down to the hospital. He's stoned. I had everything I could do not to punch his head in. And the medic said, like, you know, Bobby, you don't understand the problem. Toluene is a synthetic narcotic. Walpole's population was 580. 265 prisoners were on Toluene. 265 were on a synthetic narcotic. Guys were getting Adderall, which is dexamphetamine, 80 milligrams a day. Walpole had, in an 18-month period, 20 murders. Walpole opened in 1956. The first murder that occurred in Walpole was 1970, right? Between 71 to 73, 20 people die. What happened? After 73, the murder rate almost disappears. What happened was the medical people came in and pulled the drugs out.
Well, now they did the same thing again, and the violence is going up because they're taking away...
Because it's the drugs.
Yeah, they're taking...
They're trying to use drugs to control prisoners, and it turns around and bites them. They were given, and this is what the medics told me, they said, Bobby, we get guys sent from the deputy's office with a message from the deputy's office to put this guy on Toluene for 3 or 4 days for being a stool pigeon. They're rewarding him with medication. It's in the book.
There's guys in the HSU...
But it's in the book.
512s
And if
for
you
that.
don't refute it, you know what that's called in legal parlance? A tacit admission of guilt. We put it in writing in the book and said, this is what happened. You're responsible for 20 people dying in that prison. And they never sued us. That's a tacit admission of guilt. And that's the nature of the beast of prisons. Prisons are ugly, ugly, ugly places. I mean, listen, there are some dangerous people in prisons. but the vast majority aren't. Drug addicts do not prolong, oh, it fell? Aha. Excuse me, folks, I lost my voice. Right there. Say something nice while I do this.
Bobby, look, you're touching on a very big issue right here. I mean, right now, I mean, at the time when murders were being, committed due to medication, it's actually changed around to the opposite end of the spectrum now, where they have guys on legitimate mental health medications, whether it be Klonopin or any other antipsychotic. And what the institution is doing now is taking people off of medication that they're giving them to help control their moods, and they're becoming violent again.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys are coming out of DDU, and what they're doing is they're committing heinous acts to other inmates because they don't know how to be around people anymore. Now, take that person who is going to be released to population.
Okay, but let me stop you 1 second, because that lets me explain something to people. When you're in a cell for several years, no one's in your space, you suddenly come into population, and people, when they open the cell doors, everybody comes out, and you're suddenly surrounded with people. Individuals have instant panic attacks. And that's where the violence is coming from, guys coming out of DDUs. But go ahead, sorry.
Well, that's why they had them on benzos. They had them on Klonopin or Ativan or whatever the case may be, for whatever benzodiazepine. And they're taking those away now, so those panic attacks are coming back. So people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar, manic depressive, whatever you want to call it, disorder 1 or 2, social anxiety disorders, they're going untreated, and as a result, people are suffering. People are getting hurt.
I know numerous individuals that if they didn't give them the drugs, I'd go out and find them and give them to them.
Yeah, look,
they cannot survive without them.
No, it's terrible. Look, I'm not ashamed to say it. I was on medication in prison, and it helped me vastly, and I continued it on the street.
Used properly, yes. Certain individuals need drugs in order to make it through the night. The way they did it in the 70s, no, you can't do that.
Absolutely not.
And folks, we are running out of time, and thank you very much for coming, Michael.
No problem.
Appreciate your, and we've got to do it again, because it's a subject that's this big, and we really barely scraped the surface of it. So good night, and we'll see you when we see you.